A very good morning to all of you. In my last lecture, I introduced you people to uh, Jevan, Todorov. And in this lecture, we shall be dealing with a critical literary essay by Todorov. The title of the essay is Structural Analysis of Narrative. Now, this particular essay, Structural Analysis of Narrative by Todorov, was published in the year 1969. In this essay, Todorov represents a condensed version of his narratological approach. Narratology is the study of narratives, which was famous in France of 1960s and 70s among the literary scholars. So they adopted narratological approach, and in this essay, Todorov presents a condensed manifesto. Manifesto means you might be knowing the line, the outline of the particular approach. So in short, we can say that it is Todorov's narratological approach to the study of literature. Structural analysis of approach narratives tries to develop a poetics. In my last lecture, I had told you something about poetics as well, and you are very much familiar with Aristotle's poetics. So it is the study of poetry, rhythm, etc. Okay, how poetry in a sense literature. So he tries to develop this poetics, the science of studying literature through this particular essay. Or it can be considered as a theoretical study of literary techniques and categories. While studying poetry and drama in your SYBA, you must have got familiar with different literary dramatic techniques and even poetic techniques. So this is the theoretical study of literary techniques. So in the context of poetry, you must have studied rhyme, rhythm, meter, etc., sound devices, or other poetic devices, figures of speech. So they come under literary techniques. And in case of drama as well, you have got different literary techniques such as the use of plot and all. Okay, so this is a kind of theoretical study of literary techniques and categories. And in this essay, Todorov distinguishes his version of structural analysis from the new criticism. He tries to establish structural analysis as a different way of studying literature. Now, recently, in the last semester, you got introduced with American New Criticism. Do you remember the name of the critic? Which critic you studied in the last semester? It was Clint Brooks and his New Criticism. The language of paradox in poetry we understood. So Todorov distinguishes his way of understanding literature through this structural analysis from the new criticism. Okay, you are familiar with new criticism. It was the predominant Anglo-American critical approach of the mid 20th century, wherein Clint Brooke was the uh, prominent advocate of new criticism, and he studied poetry, and it was he is credited to have established the scientific approach to the study of poetry in American universities. Okay, we understood that in the last semester. So he tries to distinguish, Todor tries to distinguish his approach from new criticism. And for this, he analyzes the Italian story, Boccaccio's Decameron. It is a very famous work. Okay, so he tries to use this technique, this theory or narratology, we can say the condensed form of narratology, in the study of Boccaccio's Decameron. When we talk about new criticism and structural analysis, both focus on internal literary features of works. They are not concerned with external aspects. So they focus on internal features, not on external features. So they don't talk about historical context. So we have studied new criticism in with reference to Clint Brook. Therefore, you have better understanding of this. So while focusing on the internal literary devices or features, Chadra notes that the new criticism deals only with the individual work itself. So here the difference. Although the approaches are same, the difference is that new criticism deals with the individual work, the work by individual author. Whereas the structuralist method proposes to understand the overall system, not the individual work, in which that particular work is a part. So he is concerned with literature in general, how literature functions, how the underlying system of literature. Okay, I already have told you he was a structuralist in his approach. So Todorov adopts the first aspect of structuralism, that is Lang, or what we call the infrastructure or signifier. The first term is important for them. The underlying system is important for them. So while analyzing, this Boccaccio's Decameron, for example, we can see Todorow's interest is not only in any individual story or tale, but in the general and abstract plot structure that govern all the tales. Now, if you are well familiar with linguistic structuralism of Saussure, you will be able to understand this. Saussure's focus was not on parole, it was on lang. Lang is the general and abstract structure of language that govern the language, the functioning of the language, that govern parole. How the story comes into being. We can see the story, but how it comes into being is important for Todorov. So his focus is on the general and abstract plot structure, okay, that govern all the stories or tales. So this is how we can establish the difference between new critical method and the structuralist method. According to Todorov, the new critical method results only in paraphrase. Now, when you study a poem, you try to tell the meaning in your own words, that is paraphrasing. For example, when we say, down came the rain, I wander lonely as a cloud. Down came the rain is the poetic line. For example, I can say, so here the poet says that the rain started falling down. So this is paraphrasing. I wandered lonely as a cloud. So here the poet compares himself with a cloud. That is a paraphrase. So according to Todorov, the new critical method results only in paraphrase. Therefore, it does not tell anything new. It does not create new knowledge. It only tells the, what is the Marathi word for that paraphrasing saransh, for example. We read a poem and we try to tell it in our language. So that is paraphrasing, line by line explanation. So that does not come up with new knowledge, according to Todrow. It's a kind of, paraphrasing only. So when we contrast the structuralist method with the new critical method, this particular method charts the systematic laws and patterns that generate literary works. It is more interested in what? In studying the rules, in studying the underlying patterns or laws which generate that particular work. For example, you see all these sentences. So these sentences are the surface structures, the superstructures, or the paroles, actual use of the pattern. But you should understand how this sentence is created. Similarly, Todrow was more interested, being the structuralist, he was more interested in finding the systematic laws and patterns that generate literary works. Therefore, this particular method is scientific in its nature and it aids the scientific knowledge of literature. The way physics aids the scientific knowledge of the laws of nature. We talk about a gravitational force and all. In the same manner, structuralist method no, brings out a scientific knowledge of literature. As linguistics, brings out the scientific knowledge of the laws of language. We define linguistics as the scientific study of language. In the same manner, structuralist method to the study of literature comes up with the scientific knowledge of literature. He calls this approach a poetics. So he goes back to Aristotle by doing so. Aristotle's original division of scientific disciplines. And according to Aristotle, poetics is the study of human made rather than natural artifacts specifically. It is human made artifacts. It is the study of verbal artifacts, such as epics and tragedies. It is not the study of natural artifacts. Okay, so he tries to establish the fact that the structuralist method is a kind of scientific method. Okay, following Aristotle's view of plot, we have already understood the elements of plot, the definition of plot with reference to Aristotle the last semester. He follows Aristotle's view of plot. Plot is the main element, the prime category of tragedy. He also accepts the same. Chodrow and his approach, the narratological approach in general, means others as well, those who follow this approach, takes plot as the central abstract structure of any narrative. And taking this particular view, this particular approach, means narratological approach, analyzes the 100 tales in the Decameron. Decameron is the collection of 100 stories, just like Arabian Nights. Okay, in Arabian Nights, we come across many stories. Similarly, Decameron is also the collection of 100 tales. And these tales, are analyzed on the basis of the similarity of their plots. And this particular analysis lead him to the insight that plot moves from an equilibrium to disequilibrium. Equilibrium means a balance, a kind of similarity. But gradually he realizes, or he realized, that there is disequilibrium. It is not on the same level. So the action of the narrative is not on equilibrium. It concludes in a new equilibrium. So according to this particular analysis, the narrative displays either avoided punishment or conversion. Means suppose a character is there in the story. In the end of the story, the character, the villain, is either punished or the punishment is avoided and an opportunity is given to that person to change, transform himself or herself. So what he states through this analysis is that all of the stories of the Decameron can be entered in this broad schema. After studying these 100 stories, analyzing these 100 stories, Todrau realizes that all these structures either display avoiding punishment or conversion. So this is how narratology works. We have next other parts to discuss. We shall go ahead with the next part.